Hello, welcome to Code Snippet. So in this video, we are going to look into one of the important topic inside Spring Boot, that is Spring Beans, right? So we are going to understand what exactly is Spring Beans, and we are also going to look into what is application context inside Spring Boot, which is again an important topic when it comes to interviews. A lot of questions will be asked inside interviews on this particular topic. What is application context? What is the use of application context? How to initialize? What is Spring IOC container? All those questions are important, and all those questions we are going to answer in this particular video. So let's get started. Sit back, relax and enjoy the show. So let's quickly go through this agenda of this particular video. So Spring Beans and application context is something that we are going to cover as a part of this video. So first we will see what exactly is bean, right? You might have heard the term bean a lot of times, but let's understand it in this video. After that, we will see what exactly is the application context. We will understand it. Again, a lot of interview questions will be asked on this. So again, an important topic. The next one is how we are going to create a bean. So there is a Spring Boot application. When we understand what exactly is bean, we should know how to create the bean inside our project. So that is something we are going to understand after that. And after that, I'm going to show you how to check if the beans are present inside your application, or what beans are present inside your application, or if you need any particular bean, then how to extract it from application context. That also I'm going to show you, right? So how to check if beans are present in your application. So there are two ways. First is by using actuators. So Spring actuator is basically a big topic that we are going to see later as a part of this series. But today I will show you the quick use of it. It is kind of a feature that is provided by Spring, which will provide production ready features that you can use directly inside your application. After that, the second way by using which we can see what beans are present in the application is by using the application context. This is the agenda of this particular video. The primary purpose of this video is to understand beans and application context. So let's get started, right? What is bean? Bean is just a Java object, right? Nothing else. We refer to Java objects as a POJO, right? Plain old Java object. Same thing. In Spring, we refer that particular object as a bean, right? So when a Java object or a POJO is managed by your Spring application, then that is referred as a bean inside your Spring application. So whenever we say bean, it's nothing but a Java object. So there will be multiple instances in this particular series where we will refer all those Java objects as bean. So whenever we say bean, bean is nothing but a Java object which is managed by your Spring application. So that is basically the bean, right? Now let's jump to understand what is application context, right? So before looking into what is application context, there is one more important thing that we need to look into, or we need to understand, is Spring IOC container. So Spring IOC container inside Spring is something which manages all your beans inside your Spring Boot application along with the dependencies of those beans. So bean creation, bean injection, bean deletion, everything will be handled by the Spring IOC container, right? So consider Spring IOC container as a box in which all the beans of your application will be stored, right? Now Spring IOC container is kind of a terminology. When it comes to actual implementation, the implementation of this Spring IOC container will be application context. So more often Spring IOC container and application context used interchangeably, right? So people may say application context, people may say Spring IOC container, right? Basically application context is implementation of your Spring IOC container, right? Let's try to understand it with this diagram. So basically here in the middle, you have Spring container, right? Or Spring IOC container, right? For which the implementation will be application context, right? So application context will be actual object inside your application, which will store or refer to all the beans, right? And in generic terms, that will be referred as Spring IOC container, right? Now consider this as your Spring Boot application, which will have a container running, Spring IOC container, and let's say you have a business objects, for example POJOs, plain old Java objects, for example book object, right? So that book object will be kind of a POJO, right? So that POJO will be used inside your application, right? And along with that POJO, you will have multiple configuration metadata. For example, you will have multiple annotations, right? For example, service annotation, controller annotation, you will have component annotation, bean annotation, all those annotations you will have, right? So these annotations will come from here, this POJO will come from here, and these POJOs will be converted to Spring Bean by using this configuration. Let's say there is a book object which is annotated with service annotation, then the bean of that particular book object will be created and stored inside your application context, and your application will be ready to use. That means you can perform operations on that particular bean object. So consider application context as a backbone of your application, which will manage all the beans, which will have a reference to all the beans that you have, and which will handle all the bean injection, bean dependencies, bean deletion, all the life cycle of bean it will handle. And it is an implementation of Spring IOC container, right? So application context is one implementation. There is one more implementation of Spring IOC container that we called as bean factories. So something to keep in mind, right? So application context we have understood. It is implementation of IOC container which will store all the beans inside your application, right? What is bean again? A plain old Java object which is managed by your Spring IOC container, right? Next one is how to create beans. Before that, let's go inside this application. So I have this Spring Boot project over here, and we don't have much over here. We just have this main application file over here. After that, I have this controller package. I have this service package. I have this simple product service. So this is basically a e-com project. So e-commerce website will have various products, right? So that's why I've created a product service to handle respective products. Now this is a simple Java class, isn't it? We have this public class product service and we just have a constructor, just a Java class, right? Plain old Java object. But is this a Spring Bean? No, right? Because if we go back to this diagram, we have a plain old Java object, but we don't have configuration metadata, right? Do we have any configuration metadata over here to convert this guy to Spring Bean? No, we don't have. So what can we do to convert this Pojo to Spring Bean is provide this configuration metadata, right? Now that metadata can be provided in two ways. That means there are two ways by which you can create a bean, right? So first way of creating bean is by using component annotation, right? So let's first try to create a bean by using component annotation over here. So in order to convert this particular Pojo to Spring Bean is by using a metadata, which is an annotation which we call as a component annotation. So the moment I annotate this class with @component, this will be converted to a bean, right? Before that, let's see what all beans are present in our application already, right? So I told you that how to check if the beans are present in the application. There are two ways, right? First one is by using actuators, right? So quickly I will tell you how I have configured actuator. So if you go to pom.xml over here, there should be pom file. So I have a dependency of Spring Boot actuator over here, Spring Boot starter actuator, and I have enabled an endpoint over here. So basically this is a configuration that we do to enable all the endpoints that are provided by your Spring Boot actuator, right? So many features this actuator will provide you. For example, health checks, for example, checking beans, checking various matrices of your application, right? So we are going to look into Spring Boot actuators later as a part of this series. We will look into that in detail, but for now, I will just show you in order to check the beans inside your application, right? So let's go back, and here we have this particular URL, localhost 8080/actuator/bean, right? So when we load this, we will get something like that. So there will be context, there will be name of your application, and there will be the beans of your application, right? So what I will do, I'll quickly search for product service. So here I'm searching. So saying that phrase not found, basically. At the bottom, you will be able to see that phrase not found. That means there is no bean, right? Because all the beans will be present. What all beans we have inside our application, all of them will be present over here. So we are not able to find it. That means it is not present, right? As we have seen, so this is just a simple object. That's why a bean is not created. Now what I will do, I will mark it as a component, right? So it is a annotation that is coming from Spring Framework, right? Which will convert this particular Pojo into Spring Bean. Now let me restart this application, stop and rerun. Now let's see what happens, right? Our application is up. Now let's go back here and let's reload this particular application. Let me open this again. And now if I search this product service, as you can see, a product service is found. That means this bean is created for us, right? So you will have details about the bean as well. The scope you will have, the type you will have, right? And which class. So class, again, it is giving the product service dot class. What is the location of that class? Everything it is giving. So this is how you can see the bean. So that means our bean is present over here, right? So this particular bean product service is converted to component, right? So as we have seen in this particular diagram over here. So if I go back to this, now in this case, our business object is product service and our configuration metadata is @component annotation, right? So any Java class you can convert to Spring Bean by using component annotation, right? Now there are various generic annotations as well. For example, this is a product service, so this can be converted to service, right? Because all the services we annotate with @service, but this service, if you go inside it, it will be a component, right? So in turn it will be a component. That's why it will again create a bean of this particular product service, right? Or the other example would be, we have a product controller over here as well, which is annotated with @rest controller. Now if I go inside this rest controller, you will see that there is a controller annotation. If I go inside controller, there will be again a component annotation. That means even if I mark any Java class by using rest controller, that also will be converted to Spring Bean. If I go back over here in our actuators and check for product controller, let's say controller, as you can see over here, you have this product controller, right? So this is again scope singleton and this is the name of your class, right? So this is again a Spring Bean basically. So basically there are two Spring Beans inside our application, product service and product controller, right? So that is how you can convert this Pojo to a Spring Bean. Now this is a Spring Bean that we have inside our application, right? Right. So that is basically the first way by which we can create a Spring Bean, right? By using component annotation, right? Or you can say service annotation, repository annotation, or rest controller or controller, right? Any annotation you can use in order to create a bean, right? Now there is one more way by which we can create a bean by using, configuration and bean annotation, right? Now let's see the example of how we can create a bean by using configuration and bean annotation, right? So what we will do over here. So here, let's say we create a new Java class, let's say payment service. Now this is the e-commerce website, so we will have a payment service as well, right? So let's create an interface probably, right? And now in this, we will give an abstract method. Let's say process payment. We have one method, which is abstract method inside this interface. Now let's create a couple of more classes. Let's say Google Pay service, right? Google Pay service is one of the class we have created, let's say, which again implements your payment service, right? Now this will have to provide the implementation of that particular method, process payment, right? Now I'll just add a simple statement over here, print statement, saying Google Pay payment is being processed, right? Now there will be multiple modes of payment, right? There could be another way. Let's say you will have credit card, let's say, right? Credit card service, which again implements your payment service, right? Again, you need to provide the implementation. Again, I will add one logger over here that credit card payment is being processed, right? Now, if you can see that there is this payment service, which is an interface, and there is this Google Pay service, which is a normal Pojo, and there is a credit card service, which is again a normal Java object, right? Now, when I want to get the object of payment service, it will be actual implementation. It can be Google Pay service or it can be credit card service, right? So how can I get it? So what can I do over here? Let's create a new package. Let's call as config, right? And in this, I will create a new, let's say, payment config, right? So here I'll create a new payment config. So this is basically a payment config class, and this is a configuration class for us, right? This class we will mark it as configuration, as we are seeing configuration plus bean, right? So this will be a configuration class for us, which will provide us the bean of type payment service, which will be either of the implementation, right? So let's see how. Now here what we can do over here is we can say, let's say we can create a method, let's say public, which will return us the payment service, and we will say payment service, right? So this is the name of the function, right? And what this payment service will do, it will return the object of which implementation we want at the moment, right? So now I want to make payments from, let's say, credit card service, right? So what I can do, I'll say return new credit card service, and that's it. Here we have added a function, right? But again, this is not a Spring Bean. Okay. In order to convert this payment service to a Spring Bean, we need to annotate it by using bean annotation. So this way I can convert this payment service to a Spring Bean, right? Whenever I use this payment service, a new credit card service will be returned, right? And that will be used wherever we want, right? Or if I want, I can also use Google Pay service over here, right? Or what I can do over here is, let's say, or we can also do it like this. We can say credit card payment service and return this credit card, and we can create one more bean basically. And here we can say Google Pay payment service and return new GPay service, right? In this way, you will have options to choose from inside your project. You can either choose credit card or you can choose Google Pay, right? So these two services. Now in this case, we are creating beans of both of the services, which will return the object of payment service, but different implementations it will return, right? It will either return credit card service or return Google Pay service, right? That's how you can create beans by using configuration plus bean annotation inside Spring Boot, right? Now let's rerun this application and let's see if these particular beans are being injected. So our application is started. Now let's go back to our actuator. Let's reload it. And now what I will do, credit, let me extend it first, that we can see beans. And what I will do, credit. So can you see this credit card payment service, right? So the name of the bean will be the name of the function that we have over here, right? Credit card payment service, that will be the name of the bean. Now that is the first bean. Second one is GPay, right? GPay service, right? GPay payment service. Also we have Google Pay payment service. So both of the beans are created. So that is basically the second way of creating bean. First one is by using a component annotation. The second one is by using component plus bean annotation that we have just seen. Now both of these beans you can use inside your application as and when you want, right? So basically both of these beans will be returned the bean of type payment service. So how you can inject it? You can inject it by using payment service and have a auto wired annotation on top of it. So bean injection and everything will be covered as a part of dependency injection video, right? So that's how we can inject it. Now there are two beans of same type. Now that is again a problem. Now here qualifier annotation comes into picture, that also we will see in future, right? So not to worry. At this moment, just focus on how we are creating beans. First by using component annotation, second by using configuration plus bean annotation, right? Now this also we have covered how to create beans and how to check beans. We have checked it by using actuators. Now let me show you how we can use application context to see what all beans we have, right? We are not diving much into details. I will quickly try to debug and show you how we can check if the bean is present inside application context, right? So what I can do over here, I can go to this main class over here. Let me expand this. So this is a starting of main application, right? I will just introduce a variable over here, which will be a application context, which is of type configurable application context, right? So this is basically again a application context that we have, right? Which is extending application context only. It's a configuration application context. So this Spring application.run will return us the application context, right? So what I'll do over here, I'll just add a print statement, context created, right? So at this point the context will be created. So what I will do, I'll add a debug point over here. And now we will initialize our application in debug mode. Rerun the application in debug mode. Let's see what happens. Now the application should stop over here, right? So it stopped. Now by this point your application context is created, right? But what we can do over here is, let's evaluate the expression. And what we can do over here, let's just say application context dot get bean. So there is a get bean method inside this application context. What you can do over here, just pass a name of the bean. What beans we have, let's say product service, I pass over here product service, right? And now when I evaluate it, it is returning us a bean, right? It is returning us the bean of type product service, isn't it? So that means a product service is present inside our application. Now if I say product service 1, then it will say no such bean definition found. So that means there is no bean of such type. Now what other beans we have created? Let's go over here and let's copy the name in the payment config we have, right? Now let me copy this particular name. There we go, and let's try to search for this. Now I evaluate, it is returning us credit card service, right, which we have created from here. So it is basically returning credit card service to us, right? And let's try GPay as well and evaluate. So again, GPay service is being returned, which we are returning from here while injecting this bean. That means your application context have all these beans present inside it, and this is how you can use it, right? Now at any point in your application, you can fetch any bean by using application context. You just need to create the object of application context and fetch the bean. So that is again one way to check if the bean is present inside your application by using application context. And that is how we have also seen that your application context consists of all the beans. It manages all the beans. Application context is a implementation of Spring IOC container. That means Spring IOC container is managing all your beans inside your Spring application, right? Again, this also we have seen. So all of the points we have covered over here, right? Basically, we have covered everything over here. So that marks the end of it. So I hope by now you have fair understanding of what is Spring Bean, what is Spring IOC container, how we can check if the beans are present inside our application, right? We have also checked how to create beans, 2 ways of creating beans inside our application, right? If you like the video, hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe to Code Snippet. Share this video with your friends so that they also have idea about Spring Beans and application context. That's it for this video. See you in the next video.